I have been reborn as a small honeybee. Still the only drone in the hive. But the female bees in front of me are all infertile worker bees, and there's only one being I can mate with. It is the queen bee of the hive. Wang Xiaofeng was originally a senior mechanic at the cosmic outpost. But his height of 1.8 meters, here, it seemed like a dwarf. It turns out that the people at the outpost were basically all tall people over 2 meters tall. They pride themselves on being the new humans chosen from a million, but I am the only one who looks down on me, a 1.8 meter earthling. Just because I reminded the commander to increase the outpost's ammunition reserves. The commander mistakenly thought I wanted to touch his logistics department's cake. He even demoted me to the grassroots maintenance team with a wave of his hand. At this time, his subordinates reported. It means another outpost was attacked by the Star Dragon clan. Upon hearing the 3 words Star Dragon clan, the officer was startled. This is a race that scours the universe for higher life forms to feed on. But upon hearing that the outpost was 12 light years away from here, the officer didn't care at all and felt that it was not his turn to worry. On the other side, Mu Zi, who was demoted to the grassroots maintenance team, was not having a good time. The maintenance team was full of newcomers who were over 2.5 meters tall. As an earthling, I am 1.8 meters tall but have become a dwarf. As I opened the door to my dorm room, what came into view was a scene of chaos. For a moment, I even had the thought of packing up and returning to Earth. But when I think back to the bold words I said when I left home, I will not return home until the mission is accomplished. I knew in my heart that there was no way I could go back to Earth. Your Highness! On the other side of the outpost, the docking bay was crowded with figures. Everything was for the arrival of Princess Vivi of the Galactic Empire, and Vivi came here to take over the outpost and become the station master. Who would have thought that Princess Vivi, who was still high above, would fall flat on her face in a blink of an eye? Fortunately, no one else saw this scene except for the accompanying cavalry. And what tripped her was the maintenance kit left in the aisle. Then, the figure of me working hard suddenly occupied their sight. They could tell at a glance from my height that I was a primitive species from Earth. And they did not hesitate to call me a dwarf winter melon. Upon hearing this, I turned my head and told the princess that my name was Wang Xiaofeng. Unexpectedly, my handsome face stunned the princess. However, the princess only blushed for 2.5 seconds. Then she pointed at the toolkit on the ground and declared that it was this thing that caused her to. She even asked me for compensation. Hearing the word compensation, my heart was touched. I happened to have something good in my pocket. I fumbled for it. A second canteen voucher. It can directly offset a luxurious seafood buffet. But the princess didn't like it, and threatened to make me pay 200,000 star coins to settle this. But she didn't know that I got into this outpost by studying hard for the exam. At this moment, I am so poor that I only have 200 left in my card. The princess never thought that there would be such a poor person in this outpost full of elites. Just then, the princess' communication device rang with the voice of her commander. It turned out that a portal had suddenly appeared near the outpost. The Star Dragon clan actually crossed a distance of 12 light years to attack. But the princess was not going to leave, because the outpost has the most sophisticated space fortress-level defense equipment in the Empire. Okay. She decided to stay here and face the Star Dragon clan with the station staff. At this moment, the deputy detected a high-risk target. It is very likely to be the Star Dragon King. The officer paced back and forth anxiously upon hearing this. Unexpectedly, even the Star Dragon King was dispatched. It seems that their target must be the isolated Princess Vivi of the royal family. After all, the power of the stars possessed by the royal family is something that aliens dream of. Thinking of this, the officer gasped. Originally, this outpost did have the most complete defense system when it was first built. But after 100 years, the annual defense funds have been embezzled by people with intentions. Nowadays, the defense system is virtually useless. Therefore, the officer immediately ordered the activation of the outpost's self-destruction program and signaled his subordinates to shield the prince's signal receiver. Unexpectedly, the officer was actually planning to leave the princess here to attract the Star Dragon clan. And the reason is very simple. This guy is one of those who deliberately embezzled the defense funds. At this moment, a large number of Star Dragon warriors appeared in the star field near the outpost. The leader was the cosmic monster, the Star Dragon King. W weighs up to 89,000 tons, with just one blow. He instantly disintegrated the mechanical armor of the human powerhouse. On the other side, the outpost self-destruction program entered the countdown. The princess watched helplessly as the escape pod flew away. Only then did the princess realize that she had been abandoned by her superiors. It was at this moment that I appeared before them with my cane. Fortunately, they met me. Otherwise, they would definitely be trapped in this outpost, relying on the experience of a senior mechanic. I took them to the escape pod. But this old six looked at the only 2 escape pods left. It was the thought of abandoning me and leaving alone, after I put on my spacesuit and reappeared. I was astonished to find that I had been abandoned by the 2 of them. Just as I was stunned by this, a large hole suddenly broke open in the top of my 21,000-ton head. The cosmic monster Bok Long suddenly occupied my vision. With a loud bang, the outpost self-destructed. The entire space began to tremble. By the time I regained consciousness, a dazzling light illuminated my way forward, accompanied me drilling into it. When I opened my eyes again, there was a honeycomb-like grid in front of me, and my hands were covered with a carapace. There's even an extra pair of hands. I didn't expect to be reborn as a little bee, and I am the only drone in the hive. The appearance and figure of the female bees in front of me are all top-notch. Unexpectedly, they surrounded me. Just when I thought my chastity was not guaranteed, Queen Bee's guard Billy stopped their behavior and motioned me to follow her to see the Queen Bee. But seeing Billy flying into the sky, I suddenly remembered one thing. I, who was reborn as a bee, have never tried to fly. Accompanied by the buzzing sound of my flapping wings, I rushed into the sky at an extremely fast speed. But I didn't control the direction well and hit a tree, immediately ushered in Billy their lazy laughter. Soon we arrived at the hive where the Queen Bee lived. But I always feel something is wrong. The guards at the door were very surprised by Billy's arrival. It's just that today is Fong Li's turn to rest. But Fong Li ignored it. She came here this time to take me to see the Queen Bee. Feeling the burning gaze of the female bees around me, I couldn't help but wonder why I didn't even see a single drone. But Fong Li said that there are more than 3,000 bees in the hive. But I am the only drone. All the others are female worker bees. Thinking of this, I was shocked. If this continues, wouldn't my body fall apart? But Fong Li told me that because of blood ties, I can only reproduce with the queen bees of other hives only once a year. I was reborn as a little bee, but I can still feel my human body. This also means that I can experience 2 different worlds. Just as my bee body saw the queen bee for the first time, the first feeling was that the queen bee's body size was really big. The next moment the word mama slipped out. Hearing this, Fong Li signaled me to call her Her Majesty the Queen Bee. This was originally a rule that should have been learned during the larval stage, because the bee colony is the overlord of this sky island. It must maintain enough majesty. Fong Li is full of confidence. She boasted that she would train me to be an excellent drone. Hearing this, the Queen Bee gave her affirmation. After all, Fong Li is the only worker bee with 2-star strength. The picture changed, and the bee colony's living area was a lively scene. All the ethnic groups that accepted the management of the bee colony lived here. They spared no effort to work hard for the bee colony, just to get the protection of the bee tribe and settle in the Sky Island. With the help of Billy, I have completely learned to fly. But Billy reminded me that I can't leave here until my strength reaches 1 star, because there are barbarians living outside who believe in the law of the jungle. After that, she even handed me a big cage directly, and indicated that this is a very nourishing food. But I remember that bees are not carnivores. It turns out that I have always understood it wrong. This group of little sisters are not bees but wasps. Soon I arrived at my room. But it's extremely simple here, without any technological products. It's equivalent to the Middle Ages on Earth. Just as I was lying in bed ready to rest, my consciousness returned to the previous space. Once again I opened my eyes and crawled out of the monster's stomach of the Star Dragon clan. My left arm had been bitten off, and my left leg also had an open injury. In order to do emergency sterilization, I quickly made a fire. In the absence of medicine, I could only use this method. I used a burning stick to cauterize my broken left arm to stop the bleeding. When I regained consciousness and woke up, I was surprised to find that it was dark. Unexpectedly, a huge hoof suddenly fell. It immediately smashed me into a pulp. The other party was actually a 6-star cosmic monster, an ancestor mountain dragon, weighing up to 180,000 tons. Fortunately, I quickly hid behind the rocks on the side. It is for this reason that I learned the shocking news. It turns out that the Star Dragon King is severely injured this time. Need to suck a lot of blood. Therefore, Zhu Yulong began to transport a large number of Star Dragon monster corpses. Thinking of this, a great idea came to mind. Maybe this is a good opportunity to leave here. As Zhu Yulong flew into the sky, I flew along with it. Just because I was hiding in the back of the monster's body. Unexpectedly, the lair of the Star Dragon clan was in an erupting active volcano. Never thought that when Zhu Yulong was unloading, the huge shock actually shook me out. I fell limply to the ground. There is not a single bone in my body that is intact. At this time, Zhu Yulong signaled that the old turtle materials had been delivered. It's time to make Longquan soup for the Star Dragon King. The old turtle gave an affirmation upon hearing that. Just as he grabbed the body behind me, he actually completely exposed me. Fortunately, this guy's eyesight wasn't very good. He didn't notice my presence even at such a close distance. He was just immersed in dealing with the monster's body. I turned around and ran away desperately, just when I thought I was safe. I didn't expect to fall into the clutches of another monster. And they also discovered my human identity. They even threatened to trample me into mincemeat. The next moment, a big foot suddenly occupied my vision. At the critical moment, I activated the safety airbag of my spacesuit. Although I escaped from under the big foot, the huge impact still sent me flying several meters away. The target was actually the big jar in the old turtle's hand. As I plunged headfirst into the big jar, the other Star Dragon monsters were so scared that their diapers got wet. Because this big jar contained the dragon's spring soup for the Dragon Lord. Just as they were about to stop the old turtle, a giant foot suddenly occupied their vision. The one who made the move was the 7-star cosmic monster, the Tyrant Dragon, weighing a massive 1.3 million tons. He instantly scared the ordinary monsters into standing still. But they still spoke of a human inside the jar. But the Tyrant Dragon paid no attention. As his claw fell, it instantly slapped the Fire Lizard Dragon at the front to death with one blow. A mere human, the Tyrant Dragon didn't take him seriously at all. So it's time for you to get out of here. After a while, the evil dragon changed his face. Just because he is now facing the Star Dragon King. Unexpectedly, the Star Dragon King was deliberately injured. Everything is just to absorb the power of the stars and Princess Vidi's body. As the old turtle poured the dragon's spring soup into the blood pool, I couldn't help but start drifting. The old turtle didn't notice my existence at all. But my situation is not optimistic. At this moment, even breathing is a luxury for me. I alone have the bodies of two different races. Just as the human body lost consciousness, my consciousness returned to the bee's body. Thinking of this, I pinched my face abruptly. The severe pain woke me up instantly. It turns out none of this was a dream. When one body loses consciousness, I will wake up in another body. This also means that I will have two bodies. Thinking about this, I can't help but suspect that I am that 1 in a million genius. But then I thought about it. The human body is probably already cold. It seems that I am still a wasp. At least as the only male wasp, there are countless beautiful women to accompany. At this time, there was a rumbling in my stomach. It dawned on me that I haven't eaten anything since entering this body. The little sister said that the food in the cage is very nourishing. I didn't expect this food to be a moth, and the kind that can talk. I took a tentative bite. A taste of raw shrimp went straight to my head. I'm dead. As expected, I couldn't stand the taste of this thing. Therefore, I directly opened the door and threw the moth out. The moth never thought that it would be saved, but it was only happy for 2.5 seconds. It was discovered by the wasp ladies outside the door. From their hungry expressions, it was not difficult to see. This moth is definitely a delicacy in the eyes of wasps. The next moment the moth knocked on the door seeking protection. Just as I slowly opened the door, the moth hugged my thigh and asked me to take it in and let it stay here. In return, it will take me to its house to eat the best pollen cake. On the way, the moth suddenly found a bread flower on the roadside. Along with it, it pulled the bread flower down. It turned out to let me deal with it with bread flowers first, because from here to its home is still some distance. Thinking of this, I tasted the bread flour. It tasted sweet and not bad. I felt my stomach growl, which happened to ease my hunger. It's all worth it to be able to eat the delicious pollen cake, because the moth sister's pollen cake tastes amazing. Just then, a quarrel came from ahead. I will work hard to repay you. Please give my brother back to me. But the mud wasp beast paid no attention. It swatted the moth sister to the ground. The moth sister couldn't stop her tears from flowing. She guessed in her heart that her brother had already entered the stomach of some adult. The next moment, her brother's figure suddenly occupied her vision. Hearing this, the mud wasp beast was very surprised, because it was she who had sold her brother to the hornet tribe before. At this moment, the mud wasp noticed my presence, and immediately the mud wasp was so scared that her diaper got wet. This is because the hornet tribe is the overlord of Sky Island. Knowing this, I signaled to the mud wasp to direct any matters towards me. After all, it was my personal decision to send the moth back. Upon hearing this, the mud wasp immediately knelt down and begged for my forgiveness for her rudeness just now. Thinking of this, I was shocked. How could someone who was so arrogant just now suddenly become so cowardly? The moth explained. It turns out that the queen of the hornets possesses the king's power. No insect in the entire Sky Island dares to offend the hornet tribe. Yes, therefore, I took a superior stance and lectured the mud wasp, and ordered her never to bully the moth and her kind again. Yes. Suddenly, the mud dauber wasp noticed that there were no worker bees accompanying me. Unexpectedly, an evil thought came to its mind. On the other side, the little yellow jacket sisters had already discovered that I had sneaked out. This was simply because the footprints beside my bedroom were impossible to miss. I had been reborn as the only drone in the beehive. On one side were the adorable little yellow jacket sisters. On the other side was the cold and charming mud dauber queen. So, what should I choose? By the time the little yellow jacket sisters discovered I had left the yellow jacket tribe, I was already far away in the moth's home, savoring pollen cakes. Unexpectedly, this pollen cake really did have a unique flavor. The only flaw in the ointment was that it didn't have a trace of meaty taste. The moth siblings who heard this felt as if they had been dealt a heavy blow. As expected, they still couldn't escape the fate of being eaten. Brother Moth only pondered for 2.5 seconds. He actually picked up the knife from the table. He threatened to cut his flesh to repay my life-saving grace. At this critical moment, I knocked the knife away, and apologized to Brother Moth for what I just said, because in my heart it had become my friend. Just then, a voice interrupted us. It turned out to be the mud wasp beast returning. Wait. This time he even brought a tall and mighty bodyguard. I don't know where the confidence comes from. 0. He threatened to take me back to their mud wasp clan. I didn't pay attention to it. After all, I used to practice when I was on Earth. As the bodyguard raised his fist and attacked me, I didn't panic at all. Assume an attack posture to remain unchanged in the face of all changes. Slightly sideways humph. Then dodged the bodyguard's inevitable blow. He took advantage of the momentum to punch the opponent hard in the abdomen. But I was surprised to find that the other party did not react at all. The next moment, a large hand suddenly occupied my vision. I was picked up by the other party by the head. He pressed me into the ground in front of the moth sister. Screams were endless. Immediately scared the moth siblings to wet their diapers. After a while, I lost consciousness. Sure enough, I'm still a weak chicken. When I opened my eyes again, I was already in an enclosed space. The moth said that we would be delivered to the ground soon. It turns out that the bodyguard's other identity is a transporter, and the name is Half-Cent. And above the ground lived dangerous creatures called dragon beasts. Before this, the insects also lived on the surface. But after the dragon beasts invaded, the insects were defeated and left their homeland. Hearing the words, dragon beasts, I suddenly thought of the Star Dragon clan. Could it be that this planet has also been ravaged by the Star Dragon clan? So, since the surface is so dangerous, mud wasps. So why do the mud wasps still live there? Brother Moth gave an explanation for this. It turns out that the mud wasps' nests are located in underground caves, and that place is too barren and has been completely abandoned by the dragon beasts. After speaking, the mud wasp opened the box, and indicated that we had reached the underground cave. Unexpectedly, this place was full of slaves captured by the mud wasps. Are these the slaves who have to work desperately to survive for the mud wasps? And every insect is covered in scars. It seems like they've been brutally beaten quite often. Thinking about this, I can't help but shudder. A moment later, the mud wasp brought me to her sisters. Unexpectedly, each and every one of them had a mature, older sister aura. Moreover, just like the wasp tribe, they were all female wasps. Sure enough, they were also targeting me, the only male wasp. But even though I'm under their roof, I refused to bow my head. Neither servile nor overbearing, I declared that I would never mate with them. Never would I have thought that this would earn me a hard slap from the mud wasp. This slap instantly turned me into their prisoner. This scene happened to be witnessed by two native monsters here. Flower mantis never expected that the mud wasps would act so domineeringly. They even dared to touch a male wasp from the wasp tribe. Changjia, on the other hand, thought this was a perfect opportunity. The perfect chance to use the wasp tribe to eliminate the mud wasps. The flower mantises fear this move will only invite a wolf into the house. Carelessly driving away the digger wasps might make them slaves to the hornets. But Changjia expresses that at this stage, the digger wasp's rule is suffocating. As for whether the hornets are trustworthy, that's a question for another time. On the other side, my situation is simply terrible. The digger wasp beast actually locked me in this underground mining area to reflect on myself. But I really can't bring myself to mate with this old lady in front of me. To my surprise, the moth siblings are also imprisoned here. And there are other monsters I haven't seen before. From the mouth of the moth brother, I learned their true identities. They are actually the natives here, prisoned here due to the digger wasp's rule, I'm called. But the moment they saw me arrive, they had hope, because the hornets will surely wipe out the digger wasps and bring them freedom. But I regretfully told them that I had only sneaked out. So under normal circumstances, the wasp tribe wouldn't come here. Unexpectedly, it was the caterpillars who turned around to comfort me. They were just grumbling. Just then, a deep voice sounded from behind. He threatened to be able to bring the wasp army to the rescue. The tall and mighty Changjia actually performed a knightly salute to me, and begged me to help them get rid of the mud wasp's rule. But how can I deserve such a great gift? Now I don't even have the strength of 1 star. But Changjia seemed to recognize me, and said that he would risk his life to escort me safely out of here. Thinking of this, I am full of confidence. This guy Changjia looks reliable. Then Changjia entrusted me to the flower mantis, and he himself will help me lead the guards away. I didn't expect this flower mantis to not only be an ice beauty, but also the only star-ranked expert besides Changjia. After Changjia and I parted ways, he directly led away half of the guarding mud wasps. The remaining mud wasps were all taken care of by flower mantis alone. I saw flower mantis dash forward and disappear from her spot. The next moment, she was already approaching 2 mud wasp guards. With just 1 blow, she sent the mud wasp guards flying several meters away. The huge commotion immediately attracted more mud wasp guards, right, middle, and left. But under flower mantis speed, these mud wasp guards were no match at all. In the end, only flower mantis was left standing on the field. Thinking of this, she signaled me to quickly follow her. Unexpectedly, flower mantis suddenly stopped her advance, only because she found that 1 mud wasp guard was missing. And that mud wasp guard is running toward a bell tower, along with the mud wasp guard sounding the enemy attack alarm. The situation instantly took a 180-degree reversal. My chest turned out to be a 5-pointed star symbol. At the critical moment of life and death, the 5-pointed star burst into a dazzling light. Just now, the mantis carried me to dodge the mud wasp guard's pursuit. Never thought that piece of softness on my chest would suffocate me. After the mud wasp guard left, the mantis slowly landed. Per me, I was already suffocated unconscious. Fortunately, I arrived at the end of the passage without any danger. I thought victory was in sight after passing here. Unexpectedly, the mud wasp beast was already waiting here. So from the moment the alarm bell rang, the mud wasps had already arranged their battle formation. So, this should be the idea of that traitor Changjia, right? Hearing this, flower mantis denied mud wasp's opinion. Her master Changjia would not be a traitor. Flower mantis even motioned me to retreat. She would face the mud wasps alone. Before I could react, the opponent charged at flower mantis. I saw that flower mantis' movements were extremely agile. The opponent couldn't even get close to her. With just 1 slash, she sent the mud wasp guard flying several meters away. Just then, a figure suddenly occupied her vision. The orchid mantis never expected this insect's carapace to be so hard. Hearing this, the orchid mantis cried out in alarm, only because he was in the stiff cooldown period after launching an attack, along with the opponent's powerful elbow strike. The orchid mantis was hit hard and was knocked back several meters. However, the opponent did not intend to let the orchid mantis go. He rushed at the orchid mantis with a giant fist. At the critical moment, the orchid mantis dodged sideways. The speed of his movement even created an afterimage. As the opponent's giant fist hit the ground, the entire space began to tremble. Hearing this, the orchid mantis retreated to distance himself. Never thought that the opponent would reach out with a claw and grab his ankle. The next moment, the orchid mantis made close contact with the ground. The ground cracked and screams could be heard endlessly, only because the opponent didn't understand how to be gentle at all. Raised a sandbag-sized fist and gave the flower mantis a good beating. But even though the flower mantis was beaten to this state, she still signaled me to flee this place immediately. But the next moment, lowly me was captured by the other party. And I couldn't even resist. On the other side, the mud wasp beast was quite impressed by the flower mantis skills. It was a pity that her opponent was the longhorn beetle, who was about to break through to 2 stars. After that, the mud wasp beast immediately revealed its killing move, the paralyzing stinger. As the stinger pierced the flower mantis' neck, the flower mantis was instantly immobilized, becoming a fish on the chopping block. It was no surprise that she would become food for the mud wasp beast. Just at this moment, the longhorn beetle asked, carrying me, "Master, how should this little wasp be dealt with?" Hearing this, the mud wasp beast gestured to lock me in a cage and keep me under close watch. After mating, I will be eliminated to avoid any future troubles. Poor me, even as a noble wasp, I still live such a miserable life. Is there really no chance for me to become a hero? Just then, a mud wasp guard came to report in a panic. As the mud wasp guard was describing something passionately, the ground behind him cracked and the whole space began to tremble. It was Chang Jia and the moths who came into view. The mud wasp beast never expected that this mob could be trained by Chang Jia to be so high-spirited. It has to be admitted that Chang Jia does have some tricks up his sleeve. With just a slight move, Chang Jia sent a group of mud wasp guards flying several meters away. Unexpectedly, the longhorn beetle standing beside Chang Jia looked extremely small, and Chang Jia also has a resounding title, former captain of the mud wasp guard. While Chang Jia and the longhorn beetle were at a standoff, I seized the opportunity and made a run for it. Immediately, I helped the fallen flower mantis to her feet, throat, and motioned for her to leave with me. However, the flower mantis refused my offer. She declared that I had to continue on my own from this point forward. It turned out her body had reached its limit. Even the slightest movement was a luxury she couldn't afford. Just then, the mud dauber wasp abruptly entered my field of vision. She brandished her paralyzing poison needle menacingly. At that very moment, the moth swooped down and firmly grasped onto the mud dauber wasp's face. The Luna moth followed closely behind, wrapping her arms around the mud dauber wasp to restrict her movements. Everything they did was solely to create an opportunity for me to escape. Thinking of this, I fought back tears and stood my ground, uttering the words, "Don't touch me, you old hag." I couldn't bear to let their sacrifice be in vain. On the other side, the battle between Chang Jia and the longhorn beetle was one-sided. It was just a 1-star longhorn beetle. There was no way it could win against the 2-star Chang Jia. Thinking of this, the longhorn beetle began to play the emotional card, hoping that Chang Jia could give some face for the sake of old times. Hearing this, Chang Jia instantly flew into a rage, because the mud wasp had secretly killed his relatives. And that was the reason why Chang Jia betrayed the mud wasp clan. Just as the longhorn beetle was being continuously beaten by Chang Jia, the mud wasp signaled the longhorn beetle not to fight. The top priority was to chase me back. But only the longhorn beetle knew how difficult his situation was. At this moment, there was not a single intact bone in his body. But he could not disobey the mud wasp's order. He had no choice but to force himself to stand up. Chang Jia was not going to let the longhorn beetle go. Just as he was about to make his move, the mud wasp beast attacked from behind with a paralyzing poison needle. Only 2.5 seconds had passed. Chang Jia's body began to go numb. Seeing this, the mud wasp guards instantly felt that they could do it. They immediately began to besiege Chang Jia. On the other side, the longhorn beetle had caught up with me in the air, but I was agile. The longhorn beetle was still a little short of catching me. At this moment, a 5-pointed star mark appeared on my chest, and it also burst into a dazzling light. but seeing the 5-pointed star mark on my chest. It was the longhorn beetle that greeted me with a relentless pursuit. Just one hit, so it knocked the previous night's meal out of me. But the longhorn beetle didn't plan to let me go. It raised its hand and charged at me. Just at this moment, the 5-pointed star symbol burst into a dazzling light. A sharp pain suddenly swept through my entire body. The longhorn beetle signaled me to give up resistance and stop struggling in vain. But I didn't pay attention to it. After all, I carried everyone's hope of escaping from here. Thinking of this, my emotions climbed to the highest point. At this time, the human body far away in the Star Dragon tribe seemed to sense something. At this instant, 2 different bodies actually possessed consciousness at the same time. The dazzling light engulfed the entire space, and the whole space began to tremble. The longhorn beetle never thought that, at the critical moment of life and death, I actually succeeded in ascending to a star. But the longhorn beetle was full of confidence. He thought that he, at the peak of 1 star, could crush me. Little did he know that my human body was absorbing the power of the Star Dragon King, Li Shou. The absorption just happened to nourish my wasp body. So even if it was a longhorn beetle at the peak of 1 star, I was not afraid at all. I raised my hand and gave him a big slap to send him to see his grandma. The longhorn beetle fainted and lost consciousness from the punch. The flower mantis, upon seeing this scene, was very shocked. I didn't expect that I actually defeated the longhorn beetle. The moth siblings on the side were even more shocked and stunned in place. You know, I was still running away just now. At this time, even Chang Jia and the others who were fighting stopped fighting. After all, my feat was really unbelievable. And the mud dauber beast only hesitated for 2.5 seconds. Then he raised his hand and signaled the mud dauber guards to catch up with me quickly. At this moment, the happiest one was the caterpillar. As long as I can break through, it means they will be freed from the sea of misery. Hearing this, the other friends in the underground caves shouted loudly. In their hearts, they had already seen the dawn of victory. The caterpillar, taking the lead, charged forward with a hammer in hand. On the other side, although I defeated the longhorn beetle with 1 punch, the surge of power I had just felt had vanished. At that moment, the mud wasp guards caught up. I had no choice but to turn around and run with all my might towards Sky Island. At this time, Bee Queen, in the outskirts of Sky Island, was searching for me. Suddenly a report came. A swarm of mud wasps of unknown origin was flying towards Sky Island. Upon hearing this, Bee Queen was furious. They dared to cause trouble at this critical juncture. After a moment of consideration, Bee Queen ordered everyone to gather and investigate. She immediately abandoned the search for me. I didn't know at this time I was being chased by a group of mud wasp guards and couldn't find north. Until I hit a soft spot and stopped. Good guy, it was soft. But it was also really fierce. But I'm not going to give up. I raised my hand and tried to burst out with the power I had just now. But the reality gave me a hard slap in the face. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get any strength out. Not surprisingly, I fell into the hands of the mud wasp guards. But Feng Li's figure suddenly occupied my vision. There were other female bee sisters who came to my rescue. The mud wasp guards panicked. They immediately lied that they wanted to take me back to entertain me. But Feng Li didn't believe a word they said. With an order from Feng Li, the wasp guards instantly surrounded the mud wasp guard. There was no escape for the mud wasp guard.